trapped on the haunted plane in another dimension. The storm had been raging for hours, its violent winds buffeting Flight 7117 as it cruised through the darkened skies. Elaine, seated by the window, clutched her armrest as the turbulence intensified. The other passengers were equally uneasy, their faces pale under the flickering cabin lights. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing severe turbulence. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened." Elaine peered out the window, but the storm clouds outside seemed unnatural. The lightning flashes were a sickly green, illuminating twisted shapes that didn't belong to this world. Suddenly, the plane lurched violently, and everything went black. When Elaine regained consciousness, the plane was eerily silent. The usual hum of the engines was absent, replaced by an oppressive stillness. Looking around, she realized the seats were empty. Everyone was gone. "Hello?" she called out, her voice echoing down the dimly lit cabin. There was no response. Panic set in as she unbuckled her seatbelt and stood. The air felt heavy, as though it were pressing against her. Elaine began to explore the plane, moving through the rows of abandoned seats. The overhead compartments were shut, and the windows revealed a swirling void outside. No clouds, no stars, just an endless expanse of black and green mist. In the first-class section, she found signs of a struggle. Seats were overturned, and there were deep scratches on the walls. A faint whisper reached her ears, a sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Elaine!" Her heart stopped. Someone or something knew her name. She spun around, but the cabin was empty. The whisper came again, louder this time. "Elaine, you shouldn't be here." Her breath quickened as she moved toward the cockpit. The door was ajar, and she hesitated before pushing it open. Inside, the pilot's seat was empty, and the controls were dead. The windshield revealed the same swirling void outside. Suddenly, a shadow moved behind her. Spinning around, Elaine saw a figure standing in the doorway. It was a man, or at least it looked like one. His face was pale, his eyes sunken and devoid of life. "You're not supposed to be here," he said in a hollow voice. Elaine stumbled back, her legs trembling. "Who are you? Where's everyone?" "They're gone," the man replied. "Lost to the void, and soon you will be too." The lights flickered and the figure vanished. Elaine's screams echoed through the cabin as she ran back to her seat, desperate for any sense of normalcy. But the plane seemed to stretch endlessly, its rows of seats multiplying as she ran. She stopped when she reached a familiar face. A flight attendant stood in the aisle, her uniform pristine, but her expression blank. "Please return to your seat," the attendant said, her voice mechanical. "I can't. What's happening? Where are we?" The attendant didn't answer. Instead, she turned and began walking toward the rear of the plane. Desperate for answers, Elaine followed her. The cabin grew darker with each step, the shadows thickening until they swallowed everything. The flight attendant stopped at a door that Elaine hadn't seen before. It was marked with strange symbols that glowed faintly in the darkness. The attendant turned to her, her face now twisted into a grotesque smile. "This is where it ends," she said. The door creaked open, revealing a swirling abyss. A deafening roar filled Elaine's ears as the void seemed to pull at her, dragging her toward its depths. She tried to resist, clawing at the walls, but the pull was too strong. Just as she was about to be consumed, a blinding light filled the cabin. The roar ceased, and Elaine found herself back in her seat. The storm was gone, and the plane was cruising under a clear sky. The other passengers were back, chatting and laughing as though nothing had happened. Elaine looked around in disbelief. Had it all been a nightmare? But then she noticed the flight attendant walking down the aisle. Their eyes met.